presenting the next paper, Dr. Bhujjati Sharma ji, Visual Aesthetics of Vaishnava Literary Culture of Assam, an analysis of the Chitra Bhagavata in Assamese.
Namaskar. Indika aru Srimad Andaman Kola Banijya Vidyalaya Jugmo Hojjonnot Onusthito Vaishnavবাদৰ ওপৰৰ বৈষ্ণৱবাদ বিষয়ে আলোচনা চক্ৰত মই অসমৰ বৈষ্ণৱ সাহিত্য সংস্কৃতিৰ অন্তৰ্গত চিত্ৰ ভাগৱতৰ পাণ্ডুলিপিৰ বিষয়ে আৰু এই পাণ্ডুলিপিখনত প্ৰযোজ্য যেটো চাক্ষুষ নন্দন তত্ত্ব ভিজুৱেল এস্থেটিক্সৰ বিষয়ে কিছু কথা ক'বলৈ ওলাইছো. So it's my pleasure and privilege to be presenting my paper at this conference. This is my second Indica conference, and my subject for deliberation is the visual aesthetics of the Vaishnava literary culture of Assam, and analysis of the Chitra Bhagavata in Assamese. So I shall keep to the time of 15 minutes, and yeah, all right. So my study basically revolves around, for this particular paper, revolves around this particular manuscript called Chitra Bhagavata within the Vaishnavite literary culture of Assam. And since Dr. Vijay Borabaido had already touched upon Shankardeva and his Neo-Vaishnavite movement, so I shall skip the first slide basically, because it talks about the basic objectives of the Neo-Vaishnavite movement. It's already well known. So what I would begin with is that within this particular movement, there was within this movement, Neo-Vaishnavite movement, there was a marked inclination towards the visual performative medium of dissemination, right from the onset of the Neo-Vaishnavite movement towards the closing decades of the 15th century. So information regarding Shankardev and Madhavdev are provided in the slides. So I want to focus on this importance that they accorded to the visual performative medium as a mode of disseminating their missionary enterprise. And from that, I would like to talk about the development of a new visual poetics embedded within the plural epistemological frameworks. I'll also be touching upon how the poetics here is also concerned with the pluralistic epistemology emanating from the different representational formats, be it the scriptural, oral, performative, visual, how they converged to give a cohesive, a very holistic, experiential dimension to this whole aspect of visual aesthetics. So based on this understanding, this particular paper takes for its study an illustrated Assamese manuscript called the Chitra Bhagavata. The name is slightly problematic. I'll come to that. This was composed sometime in the Shaka year 1461, that is AD 1539, most likely in the Bali Khotra. It's one of the Vaishnavite monastery located in Nagaon, Assam. So in the course of my presentation, I shall also be touching briefly upon the oral and performative elements which are signifying, which are related to the experiential and embodied forms of knowledge. This was something specifically highlighted upon by Nagaraj ji in the CFP to this particular conference. So I would be focusing on this experiential, as I talked about this cohesive organic experientiality that I was talking about, through these embodied forms of knowledge within the pre-colonial Vaishnava literary culture of Assam, as well as the institutional structure of this sectarian order and its interface with the Ahom royal culture, all of which are interconnected through a network of vigorous cultural exchange and negotiation. So I would also be dealing with, I don't have time, but in the course of my discussion, I'd also be talking about the idea of space, because within pre-colonial Assam of that period, there were different spaces from which, works on composition of different manuscripts were happening. One was the space of the monastery, the Khotra, right? And the other was also the royal court. So the production of manuscripts within those two different spaces were highly contingent upon the dominant ideology which were prevalent within those spaces, religious or the secular. So based on this would be my the base of my analysis. So in the theoretical dimension of my paper is to do with the idea of visual aesthetics, and as I argue that this idea of this study on visual aesthetics, it opens up many possibilities for a kind of a collaborative understanding between different genres of literature and visual arts through one or more kind of medialities. So in the course of my paper, I shall be talking about three kinds of medialities, but I would possibly refer to only one. These are multimediality, transmediality and intermediality. Now, what are these concepts? Now, they are defined as, this is supported from Kettenbelt. This was Professor T.S. Siddhanath. He was my MPhil supervisor. So, from his work I have quoted, in the definition is multimediality refers to the occurrence when there are multiple media in one and the same object. Transmediality refers to the transfer from one medium to another medium, media change, and intermediality refers to the correlation of media in the sense of mutual influences between media. So for obviously there are minor differences amongst these three concepts, but there are also significant overlaps. So for the purpose of this presentation, I shall rather use multimediality as a convenient term, obviously with due recognition of the fact that there are subtle differences between these three kinds of medialities. Now, as far as the study of the illustrated manuscripts are concerned from an essentially multimedial perspective, so I would like to argue that the integration of diverse expressive registers, by expressive registers I am meaning the scripto, the phono and also the performative, they give rise to a kind of a polyvalent situation where images, sounds and gestures originating from various sources, they interact with one another. Now, the Chitra Bhagavata, now I will try to see how we can apply this theory to this analysis of the Chitra Bhagavata. Now, with the Chitra Bhagavata, I would also like to mention two contemporary, near contemporary manuscripts along with Gita Govinda. This is the Assamese Gita Govinda, and Hasti Vidyarnava, the illustrated treatise on elephant lore, are notable among the illustrated Assamese manuscripts, epitomizing the joint engagement between the literature and visual arts in medieval and early modern Europe. Here, early modern Assam. Now, the royal courts of the Ahoms, the Kos and the Kosari, Major Vaidu had already talked about these kingdoms in the map that she had shown, and the Hotros were the two prime sites. I have already mentioned that, from which emerged the artistic and literary compositions in Assamese during that period. Now, whereas Chitra Bhagavata was produced within the Vaishnavite monastery, and this is important for us to understand, the Chitra Bhagavata was produced within the monastery, within the monastic order, and both Gita Govinda and Hasti Vidyarnava were composed through royal patronage in the early years of the 18th century. So the spaces from which these artistic works emerged, this is something very important as far as the visual aesthetics are concerned. Now, the Chitra Bhagavata and Gita Govinda, they represented two marked yet related styles of painting that emerged in Assam between the 17th and the 19th centuries, namely the Hotriya, that is related to the monastic order, Chitra Bhagavata, and the Gorgaon or the Raja Ghoria. Gorgaon because Gorgaon was the capital of the Ahom dynasty, so it's called Gorgoya or the Raja Ghoria or the royal styles of painting from within which Gita Govinda and Hasti Vidyarnava had emerged. Now, this Hotriya, I already mentioned about the Hotriya style. Now, as far as the dating of this particular manuscript of Chitra Bhagavata is concerned, I mean, there is slight doubt because it's deduced from the manuscript that this was composed sometime around 1539, but Noren Kolita in his book Ohomor Citrokola, in that particular book he opines that this couldn't have been composed before 1660. There are reasons for his saying so, because this is the time of Mir Jumla's invasion of Assam, and looking at the peculiar characteristics of this particular manuscript, he supposedly makes the right assumption. Now the immediate source for the illustrations of the Chitra Bhagavata was Shankardeva's translation of the selected portions from Dashama Skanda, the 10th book of the Sanskrit Bhagavata Purana. The important thing is that, let me clarify, that Chitra Bhagavata is not a separate work of art. In the pre-colonial period, the text and the image, they coexisted. So it was only within the print culture that what had happened, the text was taken away and printed separately, and the images were again printed separately. Now this juncture, this divorce, or rather this kind of a taking away the image from the text, I would see this as epistemic violence, because what it essentially did, it actually it stopped a dialogue, this multimedial dialogue that I am talking about. This is this problem that was brought about through print, right? Because the text, so what happened when I am reading, if I am just reading the text, I have to imagine, I have to use my own imagination. But for the pre-colonial, or be the audience or the reader, whatever we may call, they had the image and the text simultaneously with them. But with colonialism, or with print capitalism, whatever happened, there was a divorce, because the texts were separated. The print text was published separately, and the illustrations they came out later. So this is something I want to highlight. Now, with reference to this Chitra Bhagavata manuscript, which was recovered from the Balihotra, Maheshwar Nayak, he says, and I quote, he says that the technique and finish of the work exhibit Rajput Mughal influences, although here and there local conventions are naturally to be expected, inasmuch as practices in Assam amounted to an independent school. Now, obviously, Maheshwar Nayak here is talking about a possible Assam school of painting. But at the same time, he is also careful not to posit the Assam style as an extension of the Mughal school. No, I mean but it has its own features, which he tried to highlight in the course of his analysis. But Chitra Bhagavata basically was conceived within the monastic space, and this is something which directly concerns us for our this present conference on Vaishnavism. Now at this time, let us take an image as an example. Now this particular image, if we take, this is the image which is the birth of Krishna in prison. I mean, this is immediately just after the birth of Krishna. There is Vasudeva and Devaki on either sides. Now this is the scene where Krishna appears in his magnificent form before Vasudeva and Devaki in the prison cell, and informs them about his impending birth as their son. He hasn't yet born. He tells them about it. He is about to be born as their child. Now what I would do, I would just read the corresponding lines in the Bhagavata Purana, because I want to just bring back the pre-colonial experience of image and text at one place. Now in Bhagavata Purana, this is how it is described in the vernacular. In Shankardeva's translation, in Assamese, it is described as, I'll first read the Assamese and I'll move to the translation. Komolo lusono sari puje sari ostro, konthot kostopho hubhe gave pitobostro. I've translated it as, the lotus side appeared with his forearms adorned with the four insignias. The Kostava gem is shining on the necklace around his neck, and so is the yellow garment on his body. Now this is a visual description, and also complemented by a the verbal description of this particular image. So what happens? There is a very cohesive experience. The visual and the verbal, they integrate. And this is what I would rather explain, or rather posit, as a multimedial experience. Then following this argument, it may be deduced. Now I'll just stay with this image. So following this argument, Maheshwar Nayak had said that that the figures in the Chitra Bhagavata are mostly in profile. Here we see a front-on image and also two profile images. He says that the figures in the Chitra Bhagavata are mostly in profile. Sometimes the face part is profiled and silhouetted against the deep background while the body stands frontally. Now, following this argument, it may be deduced that while the front-on vision of the characters enables the artist to capture the body in motion, whether in conversation, in combat, or in dance or performances, the face in profile helps in navigating the gaze of the onlooker across the length and breadth of the visual panel inscribed within this folio. I mean, the profile actually directs the vision of the audience because it gives a perspective within the image. It must also be remembered that upon the horizontal oblong folios, the artist draws a sequence of succeeding events from left to right, thereby presenting a linear visual text for the onlookers. In Hitangi's presentation, you could actually see that the text actually moves from left to right. So there is a narrative, there is a sequentiality, almost like a text-like sequence in the visual image. So this is where the text and the image, they interact. I'll quickly take another image. Right. Now this is an image which depicts a Gandharva dance in the Kshatriya style. Siriji had shown the image of a Kshatriya dance, but this is how it is shown in the manuscript. Now against this monochrome, sir, I will conclude in about 4-5 minutes. Against the monochrome red background in the image above, in this image, the figures are drawn upon the Alekhya sthana in shades of various colors, which capture them in a state of performance. These are not static figures. These are moving figures. Using musical instruments, namely the khol and the cymbals, thereby expressing a shared semiotic field of dance, music and color as well. Now the singularity of the human figures is emphasized by the arch patterns which seem to enclose them as if to fix our gaze upon their individual identities. They are sort of enclosed by those arch which actually helps us focus upon their individual identities. The limited facial expressions of the figures are counterbalanced by the highly meaningful use of mudras and bhangimas. The faces, the expressions are not very evocative, but their body movements. So this is another, I talked about different pluralistic epistemologies. One is the scriptocentric, one is the body phonocentric, this is the body-centric knowledge, the performance-based knowledge that we can, and Siriji had actually shown that, how it itself has its own epistemology. Now, as again I would like to invoke Nehog here, he says that there is a rhythm in the scenes of musical and dance performances of Gandharvas, Vidyadharas and Apsaras. Attempts at symmetry are evident, movements of groups are dynamically depicted. These illustrations provide illuminating insights in the practice of representing the Leela or the divine sport of Krishna, more specifically his childhood acts, as in the case of Chitra Bhagavata, through performance. And here exactly what happens, as Satyanath says, the text moves into an open space and anyone could be its audience, further diversifying the public sphere. We had talked about the bhakti public sphere. The text moves into the public sphere. The expansion of the public sphere is also characterized by the representation of the text of the body-centric, the performance-based dimensions of the Vaishnava culture, as evident from the pictorial representation of this Gandharva dance. I had one more image to show. I'll show that and I'll quickly conclude, sir. Now this is the third image. Now, right. Now these figures in these images above are cloud gods, who are instructed by Indra to let loose a torrential deluge upon the inhabitants of Vrindavan. However, if you look carefully, one's attention is immediately drawn towards the turban worn by them and also the facial features. Right. So this could actually signify a Mughal influence on the Chitra Bhagavata painting of that particular time. Right, and this, and that's why Narayan Kolita assumes that this Chitra Bhagavata manuscript could have been produced something around 1660, because the early half of the 17th century was the time when there were frequent wars between the Ahoms and the Mughals. But this also led to a kind of a cultural, enhancing of the cultural connection between these two cultures. So this could have its own influence on this, on the conceptualization of these facial patterns. Well, I guess I can come to the conclusion. So, a study on these various aspects of multimediality conceptualized and practiced within the Vaishnava literary culture of early Assam, early modern Assam, brings forth revealing insights on the symbiotic interplay between the oral, textual, performative and visual dimensions, all integrated to present a cohesive aesthetic religious experience to the bhaktas and the rasikas alike. The present study has endeavored to locate and map a transitional process whereby the artistic and literary experience traditionally embedded within the Vaishnava culture gradually moved out of the monastic confines and commingled with a more secular vision of creating art and literature under a royal authority. The Chitra Bhagavata stands on the threshold of this transition, to be followed by Gita Govinda, where one can locate a happy blending of the monastic and the royal styles. A multimedial approach towards the study of Chitra Bhagavata thus opens exciting possibilities in the study of comparative arts. I am a student of comparative literature, so I am tempted to again talk about comparative arts with a more sustained focus on the twin aspects of influence and reception. I showed that in this particular image, as regulating the interaction between the visual and the verbal domains of expression. Furthermore, one also needs to pay attention to the aspect of social epistemology, the material culture behind the production of manuscripts like this, and its close interface with the areas of traditional knowledge system. This is something would be collated with these kind of studies, involving multidisciplinary discourses relevant to the culture and society in question. Thank you so much.